Hello.
I don't know how to start this because my mind is still spinning. Maybe writing it all down will help me make sense of it. Or maybe I just need to vent before I do something I can't take back. Stephanie and I have been married for 8 years. We met in college, back when we were both broke, surviving on instant noodles and late-night study sessions. She was my best friend before she was my wife. The kind of person who could make me laugh even when everything else felt like it was falling apart. We dreamed about building a life together, kids, a house, the whole picture. And for a long time, I thought we were happy. But something changed. First, I chalked it up to stress. Stephanie had gotten a big promotion at work about 6 months ago. More responsibilities, late meetings, work trips. I was proud of her, of course. She worked hard for it. But as time went on, I started noticing little things. Things that didn't sit right. She started being on her phone all the time. Like, obsessively. And she was careful with it, too. Angling the screen away from me, quickly locking it when I walked into the room. I tried to brush it off. People get more private with work stress, right? Then there were the late nights. At first, she'd come home apologetic. Meeting ran over, she'd say. Got stuck finishing up reports. But soon, the explanations stopped. She'd walk through the door past midnight, barely mumble a greeting, and disappear into the shower. The distance between us grew. I tried to talk to her about it. Asked if she was okay, if something was wrong. She always had an excuse. Just tired. Work's crazy right now. You're overthinking things. Maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then something happened that I couldn't ignore. Last week, I was doing laundry, and I found a hotel key card in the pocket of her coat. We hadn't stayed at a hotel recently. I stood there, holding it in my hands, feeling like the floor had just been ripped out from under me. I didn't say anything that night. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I needed to be sure. So I waited, and I watched. And then came the company dinner. That's when everything blew up. Stephanie's company was hosting a formal dinner, one of those networking events where everyone pretends to enjoy themselves while secretly counting down the minutes until they can leave. She barely mentioned it to me, but when I asked if spouses were invited, she hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Oh yeah, I guess so," she said, forcing a smile. "But you'd be bored." I went anyway, and that's how I ended up standing in the doorway of a fancy hotel ballroom, watching my wife kiss another man. At first, I thought I was imagining it, that my exhaustion and paranoia had finally gotten the best of me. But no. There she was, her hands on his chest, his fingers tangled in her hair, oblivious to the room around them. I walked straight up to them. My pulse was pounding in my ears, but my voice was steady when I said it. "You just destroyed our marriage." Stephanie jerked back like she'd been burned. Her eyes went wide, her face drained of color. For a second, there was just silence. People around us were starting to stare. The guy, some smug, well-dressed stranger, glanced between us, not saying a word. Then Stephanie turned to me, her face full of something I couldn't quite place. Regret? Panic? No, despair. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "You weren't supposed to find out like this. Not, it's not what it looks like. Not, I can explain. Not even, I'm sorry." Just a miserable confession that she had planned on keeping this hidden. I took a step back, trying to process, but my voice came out before I could stop it. "So when was I supposed to find out, Stephanie? After you left me? After you moved in with him?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She just stood there, looking at me with those guilty, glassy eyes while the guy beside her shifted uncomfortably. He still hadn't said a word, like he was waiting for his cue to disappear. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. "You?" I said, turning to him. "Who the hell are you?" Finally, he spoke. His voice was smooth, calculated. "I'm her boss." Her boss. Of course. Of course, it had to be him. My stomach dropped. Her boss. The same one she'd been praising for months. The same one who sent her on those urgent late-night meetings. The same one who had apparently been doing a lot more than signing her paycheck. Stephanie looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. "It's not what you think," she whispered. I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Oh? Because it looks like you've been screwing your way up the corporate ladder." A few people gasped around us. Her boss, her lover, exhaled through his nose, barely reacting. Like this was just another business meeting. "Let's not make a scene," he said. That only pissed me off more. "Oh, I think we're past that." I turned back to Stephanie. "How long?" She hesitated. "How long?" Her lips parted, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. That's when I knew it wasn't just some drunken mistake at a work party. This had been going on for a while. And the worst part? She wasn't denying it. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. I could see it in her eyes. She was searching for a way out, some excuse, some half-truth that would soften the blow. But there was nothing left to soften. 6 months? She finally murmured, her voice barely audible. I let out a slow breath, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. 6 months. That was half a year of lies. Half a year of coming home to me, acting like nothing was wrong. Half a year of pretending our marriage was still real. I shook my head. "And what? You were just going to keep sneaking around until you got tired of me?" Her face crumpled. "No, don't." I cut her off. "Don't insult me with whatever excuse you were about to make." Her boss, the man who had been with my wife, cleared his throat. "I think we should take this somewhere private." I turned to him, rage bubbling under my skin. "You don't get to have an opinion. You've already taken enough from me." He held up his hands in mock surrender, but the arrogance in his eyes made me want to knock him flat. Stephanie reached for me, but I stepped back. I wasn't going to let her touch me. Not after this. She had already made her choice. I turned to leave. I had nothing left to say. What else was there? But just as I took a step toward the exit, something caught my eye. A small, crisp white envelope sat on the edge of the table near Stephanie's seat. It looked out of place, untouched in the middle of empty wine glasses and half-eaten plates of overpriced food. I don't know why I reached for it. Maybe instinct. Maybe some last shred of hope that this wasn't what it seemed. But the moment I opened it, that hope died. Inside was a hotel reservation. For 2. Booked weeks ago. Stephanie gasped when she saw what I was holding. "Wait!" I held up a hand, stopping her. I didn't want to hear whatever lie she had prepared next. "You weren't even trying to hide it," I said, my voice eerily calm. "This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a one-time thing. You planned this." She swallowed hard, her eyes darting to her boss, her lover, like he might somehow save her. But he just stood there, expression blank, waiting to see how this played out. I let out a hollow laugh. "You both deserve each other." And then I walked out, the envelope still clenched in my fist. I don't remember leaving the hotel. One moment I was standing in that ballroom, surrounded by murmurs and judgmental stares, and the next I was outside, cold air hitting my face like a slap. I should have gone home, should have curled up somewhere and let the weight of it all sink in. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Stephanie and her boss thought they could make a fool out of me. Thought they could lie, cheat, and walk away without consequences. They were wrong. As I sat in my car, staring blankly at the city lights, I flipped the envelope over in my hands. That hotel reservation, it was a gift. Really. Proof. Something solid I could use to turn the tables. And an idea started to form. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to ruin them. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to a friend's place. Someone I could trust. Someone who had warned me about Stephanie months ago. I had brushed him off back then, too blind to see the truth. But now I was ready to listen. "You good, man?" he asked, eyeing me as I dropped into a chair. I let out a slow breath. "Not even close. But I know what I'm going to do." I pulled out my phone and started digging through old messages, bank statements, anything that painted a picture of just how deep Stephanie's betrayal went. Between the late-night work meetings and unexplained charges on our joint account, I had more than enough breadcrumbs. And now, with the hotel reservation in my hands, I had something concrete. But I wasn't just looking to expose the affair. I wanted to hit them where it hurt. Stephanie's company had strict policies about workplace relationships, especially between executives and subordinates. Her boss, her lover, was married, too. I had just enough pieces to start setting a fire neither of them could put out. So I started collecting every bit of evidence I could. And then, I made some calls. By morning, I had everything I needed. Screenshots of her late-night messages, the hotel reservation, suspicious bank withdrawals, enough to paint a clear picture of what had been happening behind my back. But I wasn't going to confront them again. No, I wanted this to hit them when they least expected it. The first call I made was to HR at Stephanie's company. Their corporate policy was clear: relationships between managers and subordinates, especially those that involved company resources, were grounds for termination. And considering the hotel reservation had been booked using a corporate card, yeah, that was going to be a problem for them. The second call? His wife. It wasn't hard to find her. A quick search, a few mutual connections, and within minutes, I had her number. When she picked up, I expected disbelief, anger, maybe even denial. Instead, there was silence. Then, a quiet, steady voice. "I knew it," she whispered. She asked me to send everything I had. I did. And just like that, the first domino fell. By noon, the storm had started. Stephanie had no idea what was coming. I imagined her walking into work, coffee in hand, completely oblivious. Maybe she even smiled at him across the office, thinking their little secret was still safe. Then HR called them both in. I didn't need to be there to know how it played out. The corporate card charges, the power imbalance, the company's strict policy, they didn't stand a chance. Her boss, the arrogant bastard, might have thought he was untouchable, but the company had an image to protect. And a married executive using company funds for an affair? Not a good look. He was fired on the spot. Stephanie? Suspended, pending an investigation. But considering the circumstances, her career was as good as dead. And then there was his wife. She didn't just take the evidence I gave her. She went nuclear. She filed for divorce that same day, freezing their accounts before he could try to hide assets. Rumor had it she even called his boss, making sure he wouldn't get a job in their industry anytime soon. By the time Stephanie called me, her voice was shaking. "What did you do?" I smiled. "I made sure you weren't supposed to get away with it." Stephanie showed up at my door that night, red-eyed, frantic, desperate. I didn't let her in. She stood on the porch, hands gripping the sides of her coat like she was holding herself together. "Please," she said, voice raw. "Can we just talk?" I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Talk? About what, Stephanie? About how you threw away our marriage for some guy who saw you as a disposable fling?" Her face twisted. "It wasn't like that." I laughed, shaking my head. "Really? Because it sure looks like you wrecked your life for nothing." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She knew I was right. Her boss, her lover, was gone. Fired. Probably on the verge of losing everything in his divorce. He wasn't going to come to her rescue. And now, without him, she had nothing. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I know that now. But I held up a hand. "Stop. Just stop." For the first time, I felt nothing for her. No anger. No pain. Just a strange, quiet freedom. She had already made her choice. And I had made mine. I stepped back and closed the door in her face. Stephanie didn't stop trying to reach me. Calls, messages, even emails. Some were desperate, others angry. But all of them had the same underlying theme. She wanted to fix what she had destroyed. I ignored every single one. She lost her job a week later. Turns out, the company didn't want to deal with the scandal, even if she hadn't technically broken any rules. Reputation mattered more than anything. And without her lover, who was too busy drowning in divorce proceedings to care about her anymore, she had no leverage to save herself. A mutual friend told me she moved out of our apartment soon after. She couldn't afford the rent on her own. It was like watching a slow-motion collapse of the person I once knew. And I thought I would feel something. Satisfaction. vindication, closure. But all I felt was relief. Like a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. She made her choice. Now she had to live with it. And I was finally free. I didn't just move on, I rebuilt. In the months that followed, I threw myself into work, into my passions, into me. Everything I had put on hold to support Stephanie's career, I finally made time for it. I landed a promotion, started investing in myself, got into shape, and most importantly, I never looked back. One night, months later, I got a final message from Stephanie. Just one line. I wish I had chosen you. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then, without a second thought, I deleted it. Because the truth was, she did choose. And so did I. I chose myself. And I never felt stronger.
Bye.